Black Journal investigates black or white superiority. When Black Journal originates in various cities, viewers in that area can participate by calling in. This edition from New York features Dr. Francis Welsing, Professor of Psychiatry, Howard University College of Medicine, and Dr. William Shockley, Professor of Physics, Stanford University. And now our host, the executive producer, Tony Brown.
Hello, welcome to this edition of Black Journal. We have two very prominent educators, scholars on Black Journal tonight, and we feel that it is important to defend the First Amendment rights of all Americans. Dr. William Shockley, one of our guests, has had quite a difficult time speaking at some universities, and particularly some black college students do not agree with his theories. On Black Journal, we feel that Dr. Shockley's rights in the First Amendment area are parallel to black people's rights. That is, that Dr. Shockley must have a platform for his views if black people are to have a platform for their views. Dr. Francis Welsing, on the other side, has difficulty in expressing her views on legitimate mass media outlets because many whites do not agree with her theory of genetics. Now let's find out what the controversy is about. Dr. Shockley, please give us the benefit basically of what your theory is.
My principal point, Mr. Brown, is not so much a theory of black-white differences, but is summed up in one word, which is the theme of my appearance on your program and my efforts, and the word is dysgenics. And dysgenics means effectively downbreeding, retrogressive evolution. And I fear that this is worst for the black community, and I particularly welcome an opportunity to appear on Black Journal just for these reasons. And let me say also that when I first met Dr. Welsing, it was not black students who were disrupting, but white students. And Dr. Welsing made a very sincere and I thought extremely effective effort, a well-planned effort. It was not effective with these white students at Staten Island Community College, so I would have a chance to speak. In fact, I think they prevented her from saying what she wanted to say when she was trying to gain me a platform. So my main theme is that we have problems that we should face and we should look at connected with dysgenics. And I welcome any opportunity I have to bring this out so that people can look at it and worry about it.
Dr. Shockley, you are accused of having a theory that is a white racist theory. How do you respond to that?
Well, I respond to that by saying that I've considered whether or not I am a racist. Racist is an epithet that used to damage my self-esteem, but it doesn't anymore. I feel it's untrue. If you look in the dictionary as to what racist means, it means emotional feelings, irrational feelings associated with fear and hate. If I really had those, I don't think I would be here this evening. I feel that what I'm engaged in is a demand for diagnosis, and I'd like to say some more about this chart, which we'll come to probably later, which shows the disproportionate rates of reproduction for the least effective elements of the black community. I'd like to say more about that than we should in just this brief introduction. But I think there is another word that better describes what I'm involved in, and that word is raceology, which means a scientific analysis of racial differences. And I have a faith that reason is a good thing, and I feel as you do about the First Amendment, but maybe with a slightly different emphasis. I think the really important thing about the First Amendment is it is a way of guaranteeing a high likelihood that truth will emerge as a result of conflicting ideas being expressed, and I have a thesis and a basic belief that truth is a good thing and will be of benefit to man.
Thank you. Dr. Francis Welsing, give us the benefit of your theory, please.
Well, my theory was, I wrote the paper in 1969. I wrote a paper called The Cress Theory of Color Confrontation and Racism. And the sole reason behind writing that paper was an attempt to understand the behavior of white people in relationship to all people of color, every place in the world, black, brown, red, and yellow people. And the paper was presented to the Americans at the National Medical Association, the section on psychiatry in neurology, because back in 1969, the Black Caucus in the American Psychiatric Association, we had said that racism, and when we talk about racism, we're talking about the white supremacy behavior of white people. That racism was the #1 mental health problem in the nation, and it was the #1 cause of other mental health problems. And I wanted to understand what this thing of racism really is all about, because it is the thing that has caused woe and misery and suffering for the vast majority of the people on this planet that are classified as non-white. And in my attempt to understand why the necessity of white people to keep saying that white is superior and that the condition of non-white is inferior. And the more I thought about it, in conjunction with an idea that a friend of mine had, that racism was a worldwide behavioral system for the maintenance of white supremacy by a small minority of people, I put those ideas together with what we know about genetics, what we know about the condition of skin whiteness itself. The condition of skin whiteness is the genetic inability to produce skin pigment called melanin. This is a genetic recessive trait. It is a genetic deficiency state, not as defined by Francis Welsing, but defined by geneticists and dermatologists, that the inability to produce the skin pigment of melanin or melanin pigment is described as albinism. And I think that white people, even though most white people are not consciously understanding their problem in genetics, they are certainly aware that they are genetically dominated by people of color. That's why it was a statement, one drop of black blood makes you black, because people of color have the genetic capacity to annihilate white people. And so unless white people control the reproductivity of people of color, then we can postulate that perhaps one day there won't be any white people. And I think that the very survival of white people necessitates that they project genetic inferiority on people of color, because it is they who really are aware that they are genetic recessive and perhaps genetically inferior to people of color. And I am not saying this to call the condition of skin whiteness to say, well, no, white people are inferior. I'm not saying it for that purpose, but I think that it is of prime importance for the majority of people in the world to understand why it is that white people have to, the effective majority, large numbers of white people, have to move in a hostile and an aggressive way against people of color, and have to constantly focus on it's you who's genetically inferior, because they realize that there's something wrong with their genetic status. Now,
may I take a call?
Oh, sure,
All right.
please.
Let me, so that, because we have a number of calls, and we'll see what the public wants to find out also. Just 1 second. Hello, go ahead, please. You're on Black Journal.
I would like to ask the question, why does the doctor feel that his theory, Dr. Shockley, why does he feel that your theory is correct?
Well, let me say that's a long question. Let me point out one aspect. It's a question that calls for a very long answer. I think I might just at this point say that in a time like 1 hour, we may expose a problem and encourage thinking about it, and this is a very valuable thing. But to cover either Dr. Welsing's views or mine, and let me say here are, just to show that these things exist, is a pamphlet that she was good enough to give me some time ago.
This one's upside down.
Well, that one's upside down.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Right.
And this is one of my own. It's actually a collection of a debate.
The Imperative of Ethnic Education is yours.
This is the issue of the journal. Mine was, the title of my paper is somewhat different from this, but I want to say that, speaking for myself, if people would like to write to me at Stanford University, I have a post box there, Post Box S, which is the same as Shockley and Stanford. I will try to supply more information, and I'm sure Dr. Welsing will say what she can do about telling people how to reach her pamphlet. Okay. But now let me say this chart that I held up a moment ago is very important in respect to this question of why I think there may be what proves a basic difference. But I'm going to say that if there were not a basic difference in intellectual capacity in the past, there probably will be a basic difference between black and white intellectual capacity in the future, simply because of the reproduction patterns. And these are Census Bureau data, and this is the most threatening aspect. And what it indicates is that for the black women of the lowest intellectual social class, which are rural farm women, generally the education is least, the average number of children is 5.4. For women with college degrees, it's 1.9. And so this is definitely unfavorable. It is reproducing far more at the bottom end and not enough to keep even at the top end.
Dr. Shockley, can
for
you
whites, let me
explain?
just finish this. For whites, the numbers are also in this direction, but nowhere nearly as severe.
Dr. Shockley, I think that in all fairness, you should explain to the audience why it is that you have, first of all, you have a very large segment of the black population who are on farms, who are deprived in cities. Why don't you explain at the time that you're showing this, who is keeping black people in a situation like they're in? I mean, it could be, you could turn it around the other way, where you could have very large numbers of black people who are exposed to educational opportunities like white people, who are exposed to housing, who are exposed to health facilities. Why don't you explain that at the same time that you put figures like that?
I'm sure you would explain it,
No, but I
Dr.
think
Welsing,
it's important
but
in
one must
answering-
say first things first. And you've raised the basic question there, and that is whether the disadvantages are primarily a lack of opportunity or whether they are primarily a basic genetic difference. And let me mention one thing, which is that in certain areas there is no doubt about black superiority. Blacks are superior in visual acuity, and they're superior in a systematic way. Now, I don't expect that people will understand the details of this, but I simply want to show that quantitative work can be done. This happens to be a research job of my own. And what it shows, because these points that you see here lie on a line, which is not the central line, but they lie systematically on a line, what it says is that so far as visual acuity is concerned, blacks are systematically better than whites. It's as if their bell-shaped curve, their distribution curve, were pushed upwards compared to whites for visual acuity, or at least for the avoidance of bad eyesight, such that if the same shift occurred for IQ, it would mean that the average IQ distribution would be up by 9 points rather than down by about 15 points, which is the typical average.
Dr. Shockley, visual acuity is probably something that the system of white supremacy has not necessarily seen the need to affect the environment that black people are in so that it will alter the fact that they have visual acuity that is superior to whites. The fact of visual acuity is not attacked in the same way as educational opportunity and job performance is attacked. And I think that
it's evidence for a genetic difference.
Well, you see what I'm saying? There might be many, many more genetic differences where people of color appear superior.
If I may, we have a number of people and would like to get to as many as possible. If you could make your answers, not to compromise your explanation, but if you could make your answers as succinct, I would appreciate it, because we would like to involve the public as much as we can. One moment, please. You're on Black Journal. Go ahead, please.
Yes, I was wondering if Dr. Shockley could explain the basic difference between the course he is taking in explaining white supremacy and the course that Hitler took during the Nazism reign.
Thank you.
Well, there are enormous differences. In fact, the lesson to be learned from Nazi history is frequently very misunderstood, and it is a lesson which Mr. Brown has told us about earlier. It's the First Amendment. It's not that eugenics is intolerable. Actually, the eugenic programs, which are the opposite of dysgenics, eugenic programs are not inconceivable. They're not inhumane. Denmark has been carrying out programs with strong eugenic implications for maybe 30 years. And it's important to note that since World War II, Denmark's per capita homicide rate dropped and is now approximately 1/20th. That is, the number of deaths of probability being killed in a year by a violent homicide is roughly the order of 100 times less for young Danes than it is for young American blacks. Now, but the lesson, let me say what the lesson of Nazi history we have in this country, and it will protect us. It's just the thing that makes this program possible. The First Amendment, which allows freedom of speech. If one believes that is not the right answer, then one has to be one of the most anti-German racists there can be. If one believes that the German people would have tolerated the concentration camps and the gas chambers, if news media, like the programs that Mr. Brown is setting on, if those people were willing to bring discordant views out into the open, I don't believe the concentration camps and the gas chambers could have continued to exist in Germany.
I'd like to comment, because I'd like to say that I don't think that there's a major difference between what Dr. Shockley is doing. I don't think that Dr. Shockley is fully aware of what he is doing and why he is doing what he's doing. But the long-range implications of what he is doing are no different than the propaganda campaign that Hitler and his Nazi unit carried on in Germany that ended up eliminating 6 million Jewish people. Now, what is most interesting is that Hitler said the very same thing. He said, number one, that the Jews were genetically inferior to the Aryans. Number two, he was aware that the Semites had genetically dominant genetic material to the Aryans. And if we begin to understand the way that people who were in Europe at the time that the Semites arrived from Africa, when the Semites arrived in Europe from Africa, they were people who had substantial amounts of color and who had very kinky hair because they were from the continent of Africa. And the Europeans, the white people who were there, had a reaction, a color reaction to the Semites that is no different than the reaction and the concern on the part of people who are white in this area of the world or any other area of the world to people who have the genetic capacity to produce color, who can genetically annihilate their position. And I think it's very, very important, even though Dr. Shockley, I am convinced that Dr. Shockley believes that he is perhaps elevating science with all of his charts and all of his figures, but he doesn't understand the things that propel him as a white individual in a social system that has programmed him throughout his life and programmed large numbers of people like him to focus on the genetics of people of color in such a way as to destroy people of color.
Okay, take another call, 1 minute. You're on Black Journal, go ahead, please.
Yes, I had a question for Dr. Shockley. I'd like to know, is it possible to determine the amount of intelligence genes covering intelligence will have, since intelligence level is an objective man-made criteria? I know that you can determine genetically such things as mongoloidism and things of that nature, which we give an objective definition to and say that they can't perform academically. Now, can this work the other way?
Well, one of the main elements of the campaign I'm undertaking to bring objectivity in this area bears very closely on the question that was asked. The issue is, to what degree is difference in intelligence between individuals determined by their difference in environment, and to what degree is it determined by a difference in their genes? That is, which pushes the intelligence up and down more. Now, right at that point, one runs into a difficulty because a really adequate definition of intelligence, which can be generally agreed upon, doesn't seem to exist. IQ is some sort of a measure of intelligence, but it's a very man-made, limited thing. Nevertheless, one can come to significant conclusions about this. And the significant conclusion that I come to, and I think there's only one chance in 2,000 of being significantly wrong, is that differences in genes between individuals in typical white or Caucasian populations have 80% of the effect of whatever it is that pushes IQ up and down, and within that milieu, that range of environments, the differences in environments have only about 20%. And this is one of the items that is dealt with in some length in that pamphlet that I was holding up, and if Mr. Brown wants to encourage me, I will say more about it. But that's, in brief, the answer I come to.
I appreciate the brevity. Thank you.
Let me just comment here that Dr. Shockley has absolutely no way of proving that genes control intelligence and in more of a manner than the environmental influences that one is exposed to. And I think that I have a definition of intelligence that I use, and the definition is that it is the ability to decode the environment. That means to ascertain what is happening in the environment and to develop behavior that is appropriate to it. Now, things that influence behavioral performance, that is our response to the environment. It has to do with what kinds of security systems we develop with that are in our homes, what kind of environmental influences are affecting us. And we measure this every day in terms of school children's performance. If they're in a bad environment, you put them in a better environment. You can improve their performance scholastically. And I think that this is a major element that Dr. Shockley leaves out. I can understand why, because the racist system does not want to alter the dynamics of deprivation within the environment. It would prefer to say, no, the reason that you can't perform has something to do with your genes. It doesn't have anything to do with what we're doing as the population of whites to deprive people of color of the same opportunities that we give ourselves.
I'd like to say that I must make a correction here, which is I restricted my remarks. Dr. Welsing extended them in a very important way and into an important area, but that would take more than 3 times as long to cover. I restricted it to Caucasians and did not cross the racial gap. To try to deal with the racial gap, the difference in this, and give a reason for that. Dr. Shockley, you are try to think about this thing. Give us a reason why this racial gap is there, and in brief, is I've made a parallel before. It's like asking Picasso or some famous painter who can produce orderly structures on a piece of canvas to come up, and you give him a brush and a palette. You say, Mr. Picasso, please show us how you make a beautiful painting with one brushstroke. This is a long and complex argument, and Dr. Welsing, I think, is completely obscuring the issue when she says there is no way of sorting out the difference between
Dr.
genes and
Shockley,
environment.
as long as you are depriving people of the opportunities that you extend to yourselves or others like you, not that you're the one who is doing it by yourself, and certainly not that, but as long as that is happening, then people have no right to begin to compare or to hand the same test to the individuals who are deprived and the individuals who are not deprived, and then start saying, well, something is wrong with the people who are deprived, something is wrong with their genes that they cannot perform. Now, I think that I would be quite willing to accept, any group's genetic inferiority in terms of performance once you grant equal opportunity. If you're able to demonstrate after you give black people, as after the collectivity of whites give people of color, the very same opportunities that they give themselves, then wait a minute, then if we look at the results, I'll be glad to accept those results. But I think what is interesting is that white people cannot stop depriving people of color of the same opportunities that they give themselves. That is very interesting behavior, that you want to compare, but at the same time, you cannot stop saying, no, you cannot have the same opportunities that I'm going to give myself.
May I, for sake of moving along again, I would like to ask a question, and Dr. Shockley, if you could answer it yes or no, I would appreciate it. Do you believe that black people are inferior in intelligence because of their heredity?
I have a standard statement. It is not yes or no. It's memorized. I say at the same time every time, I think. What I say is this. My research leads me, and it's a tragic conclusion, really. My research leads me inescapably to the opinion that the major cause of the American Negro's intellectual and social deficits is hereditary and racially genetic in origin, and thus not remediable to a major degree by practical improvements in environment.
All right, if you believe that the position relatively of black Americans to white Americans is based on a genetic inferiority, and I will accept the responsibility for that word, then what do you see as the solution to the problem?
Well, I see the first aspect of this is to prevent the problem from becoming worse by dysgenics. This first word
Would
that
you
I
translate
mentioned.
dysgenics for me and the audience?
What I
Would that
meant
be
is
sterilization?
No, dysgenics, you see, means what that other chart I showed you says.
Should blacks,
the least effective element.
Should blacks be sterilized?
No, I have a.
But if blacks are a problem, and we do not allow.
This is inhumane. And
Dr.
I think one
Shockley
can find more humane solutions to this.
Well, then how would then
I would propose something in which one of the key phrases is regardless of sex, race, or welfare status. And this is the proposal. I call it a thinking exercise. It's mentioned in that pamphlet that I showed that you can obtain. And it goes this way, that you would offer a bonus to everyone to be sterilized. Now, we know we have a population explosion problem. We know that in India, that bonuses in the form of transistor radios are offered to people.
Would this bonus be directed to black people specifically, more than whites?
Mr. Brown, what did I say just a moment ago? I said, regardless of sex, race, or welfare status.
Now, there is a group.
That's what I say.
There is a group of white people to whom this offer should be made also.
Absolutely. Now, the offer is based upon the best estimates, best scientific estimates that one can have of any genetically carried disabilities. Now, there are some, I think, that any humane person would have no doubt about. And Dr. Welsing talked about dominant and recessive genes. I want to point out that sometimes a dominant gene can be a very bad thing, and it is a very bad thing for a neurological disease called Huntington's chorea, which is something
Which
like
is more
multiple
prominent
sclerosis.
in white people than black people.
That is correct. And I think that one should offer a large bonus for anyone who might be
Dr.
potentially
Shockley,
carrying Huntington's chorea.
Dr. Shockley,
Beyond
are you
this, it goes
aware-
on with some other factors in this, but Dr. Welsing wishes to speak.
Are you aware that white people have more genetic diseases that affect their nervous system than people of color, than black people?
I wouldn't be at all surprised. And I think
Now,
blacks apparently have higher heart problems.
Would you suggest that all of these white people who are carrying these defective genes, whose families may carry these defective genes, that they be examined and it would be suggested to them that they be sterilized? Would you suggest this?
Yes, I think I would probably in general, that this is so.
You see, but one thing that you are fully aware, that historically in the area of the world in which you live, that there has never been a massive genetic attack on white people. And first of all, the system is not going to allow that. However, there has always a massive genetic attack in terms of suggesting that white people in mass with their various genetic defects, that they be sterilized. You know that you're safe when you say, across all color lines and economic classes, you know that you're safe when you say that, because the only vulnerable group in this social system are the black people and other people of color who do not have the power to protect themselves politically and socially from the people who will organize the attack. Now, we had recently black children being sterilized in one of the southern states. Now, we have not had examples of white children recently.
This is the case of the Rolfe children.
Right, being sterilized with governmental funds. So that when you say you're talking about all groups, you're not really talking about all groups, because the people who are going to be affected by the things that you're saying are black people and people of color. And I want to make this point also, that I don't think that the television audience should simply focus on Dr. Shockley as being responsible for what Dr. Shockley is saying. There's a wide segment of the population that seems to need the kind of reinforcement that Dr. Shockley and the Jensens and the Herrensteins and the others give. There's a need to hear that black people are genetically inferior, just like in the history of Germany, apparently there was a need for that population to hear that the Jews are inferior, so that they can rationalize and justify to themselves the eventual destructive attack that was made in Germany on the Jewish people. And I think that,
I would like to go to the next question, but I want to go to the next question, and from this point on, I'm going to interrupt more frequently. But I would like to ask a question. Dr. Shockley, do you feel that your theory is gaining or has support in the governmental areas, the people who could make the decision, let's say, to offer or a bonus for sterilization to people, as you call, I think, the downers in this society?
I'm not aware that there is any. I think the idea that these matters should be discussed and brought out in the open has increased. I think.
In other words, you see you're popularizing this dysgenics concept gaining in popularity.
Well, I would say it is out in the open, the fact that, the fact that we do not have pickets, as I came in this evening, that there's not the same sort of resentment. I have been on other programs with other moderators, Mr. Brown, in which the hostility and antagonism was so thick.
Well, I think that's a very good observation, and I think that if I, as a black moderator, were hostile toward you, that I would prove that your theory is correct. But I think perhaps maybe my behavior will help you to reconsider your theory. Well, and I see you as an equal, and I feel no need to be hostile toward you. May I take another call now? Thank you so much. Go ahead, Young Black Journal, please.
Come on now. Could I ask Dr. Shockley what he thinks of a recent study done in Psychology Today, which indicates that black males lead in mixed groups, and how he would view this in light of his theory?
I'm afraid I don't recognize the context. Maybe if you could say a little more. I may not know this particular one, but I may know another one.
He's off the air.
He's off the air. Did you?
I didn't get the gist.
No,
Did you get the gist? I didn't understand. Let's go to another question then. All right. Go ahead, Young Black Journal, please.
Since Dr. Shockley does not have a degree in genetics, what makes him qualified to expound on black inferiority?
Well,
Let me respond to that. I think that that's interesting because Dr. Shockley's colleagues at Stanford will not let him teach in the genetics courses there, and they do not recognize him. I doubt very seriously whether there's any large number of geneticists that will come out in support of what Dr. Shockley is saying. But in spite of Dr. Shockley's not being a physician, not being trained in genetics, not really being trained to understand the things that influence behavioral performance, of which intelligence testing is really testing that. He is allowed to go on and talk, and he's asked to be on a number of television shows, and he's given very many platforms, and he's given all kinds of newspaper coverage. And I think this is the kind of thing that, as far as I'm concerned, needs to be understood. And I hope that if anything comes out of this program and this discussion, certainly from me, is that instead of looking at Dr. Shockley's figures and charts, certainly Black people ought to know that figures on a chart don't mean anything. Figures on a chart have lied about Black people historically, and they're still lying about Black people.
All right, could we give him the opportunity? Dr.
Yes.
Shockley,
well,
would you respond?
Yes.
I think it's the same question.
It's a question of qualifications.
Right.
I was just looking to see if I had the one most serious reprint here that was published in well, it's not so important that it was published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. It is important that it was refereed, which is unusual when a member submits a paper. And this is the paper which gives the best estimate, in my opinion, that exists anywhere, on the fraction of Caucasian ancestry in the California Negro population. I made a small refinement in the work, a small numerical refinement, but a very deep analytic one, on the work done by Professor T.E. Reed of Toronto, who has established from some 3,000 odd Oakland, California Negroes, that these Negroes are 22% Caucasian ancestry with an accuracy of 1%. Now, Reed dealt with an overly simplified model here. He dealt with a model in which he assumed that every Negro in that population had the same fraction of Caucasian ancestry as every other one, which is certainly not true because some of them had probably one white parent.
Dr. Shockley, are you saying that
I'm
light-skinned Blacks are more intelligent than dark-skinned Blacks?
No, I'm not.
What is
And I'm
Dr.
glad you brought
Shockley
that.
saying?
I'm glad you
What
brought
is
that up.
Dr.
Well, I'm
Shockley
saying,
saying?
but now let's stick to the point. What I'm saying is that I have found this really, in my way of thinking, not a difficult field to get into because, so to speak, there is so much emotional block that the analytical thinking is not very high. And this paper of mine was refereed by Bentley Glass, who is an eminent human geneticist, a past president of the American Association for the Advancement of Science. He told me he'd refereed it when we had lunch together at the academy. They don't ordinarily reveal the referees. The other referee is a man with whom I have friendly relationships, and I had wanted to get his advice, so I was going to send him a copy of the manuscript. Whereupon he told me, well, I have it already. It's been sent to me to referee. And he was willing to be included in the acknowledgments. This is James F. Crow of the University of Wisconsin. I've been invited to speak at the Galton Laboratory in England, which is one of the foundation stones of genetics, and I have spoken
Dr.
there.
You're being asked to speak a lot of places, and I really
This
sincerely...
was on genetics.
No, I know, but I'm saying whenever you go to speak, you're speaking about genetics, but I think that you really need to understand what you are verbalizing and why you're being asked to speak, because you don't have a degree in genetics and you really do not have the background in terms of understanding those things that influence behavior by your own
I think
admission.
we've made that point. Now,
You see.
may I take a call? One moment. Go ahead, you're on Black Journal, please. Okay. Go ahead, you're on Black Journal, please.
Hello, my name is Dennis Hunter, and I'm a second lieutenant with the Cadet Corps Central Harlem. I'm 17 years old. My question is directed to Dr. Shockley. And my question is, if your theory is right, should a black child never expect to be as good as a white one? And if so, I would like you to come to the Cadet Corps and tell it to the youth in my company.
No, I don't believe that's true. In fact, I have standard statements that I've made on this, and one of them says it is my position is not that all blacks are inferior to all whites. Indeed, my statistical studies show that blacks achieve almost all levels of eminent distinction that whites achieve. And I'm here with two eminent blacks who have achieved levels of distinction, and Mr. Brown, I believe, has won a number of citations for television programs. But now, what I think, I'd like to come back to this dysgenic point. Statistically, if one examines the performance of American blacks, one finds that the fraction of those who achieve high levels of distinction, the probability of one of them doing it, It's not zero, they're up there, but only the chance on a per capita basis is about 10 times smaller. Also, if I look at the probability of their getting into difficulties, the probability of very adverse performance for blacks, that is about 10 times higher in the FBI crime reports.
Dr.
Now, incidentally, let me mention two others, so we won't have it all a black-white situation. Let's put some other colors in, let's put some yellow in. Where I have looked at the limited data that's available in Census Bureau reports on American Orientals, and when I've looked at the membership list of the National Academy of Sciences, I find that American Orientals are represented in our National Academy of Sciences, which is a high scientific distinction, at about 10 times their proper per capita proportion. And they're also about 10 times lower in the FBI crime reports. So there are these systematic differences, but I think that if one is to speak to this young man's problem, which I detect the feeling in this, if one tries to live up to things which he is not destined, not equipped to do, I think this may produce a kind of paranoia in which one can't see what is holding him back, and one concludes that the white race is engaging in the sort of things that Dr. Welsing says she has a theory that accounts for it.
All right, Dr. Welsing.
I lost my point listening to that. Go ahead with another question.
Well, I would just like to say for that black youth that I think that there are a number of black people who could be used as examples for him to have faith in himself and in black people. And I think if that young man applies himself, in spite of all
theory. This young man
theories.
has the initiative to come up and ask a hard question, and he certainly deserves a big plus for this, and he should go on asking the hard questions, and he should try to be objective and size up with good judgment how far he can go so that he won't be hurt by trying too hard, and he won't stop too soon.
What I was saying more specifically is that the very presence of black people today, the good health, the good mental health, the advancement in economics, the advancement in science that black people make is really a contradiction of all of the accumulated statistics about black life in America. In other words, black people have contradicted with their lives and achievement the statistics that have been compiled all along.
Well, I think they're the exceptions that fit into the statistics, I'm afraid.
We have about 30 million exceptions to the genocidal pattern.
30 million?
Yes. There are about 30 million people now, census-wise, who admit they're black, and there are millions of black people who say they're white, who have, for historical reasons, passed over. So when you get down to measuring even the IQ mean for whites, you have some of those people who are called sociologically white, who are actually genetically black.
This is one of the researchable areas, and one of the ones that Howard University could help with.
But you do know many people who think they're white, some of which know they're not, according to the definition of being black, meaning one drop means you're all black.
Dr.
You do know
Brown,
that, don't you, Dr. Shah?
Yes, but I don't think it's very penetrating, Mr. Brown. I think one could do far better than that.
But will you admit that there are many people who are called white who are genetically black?
Frankly, I would be quite prepared to admit this, and someone asserted it. It does not happen to be an area that I've dug into. I wouldn't doubt it. But one can do some very scientific and important things with this, and if we have a chance, I'd like to make a proposal as to how this could be done at Howard University.
In other words, it's possible that if a group of black geneticists could link up, since you're basing it on
let me tell you very simply,
basis.
I've proposed experiments. I've talked about them before. If you took Howard University, say, and you take some measure of distinction of the Howard faculty, so that you say these are really the top group, these are the group that are barely making tenure. And if you were to take these two groups as populations of several hundreds and measure them, you could then determine whether one group was more Caucasian than the other. If one does this with California and Georgia, one finds there's about 11% difference in the Caucasian ancestry.
I'm going to shout a point. I think it's very important to understand that the white supremacy system, the point that Dr. Shockley is making about if you find black people who have achieved, then you're going to find people who have substantial amounts of so-called white blood, that the white supremacy system has a way of reacting aggressively and hostilely against people relative to the amount of pigment that they can produce, so that the people who have the most difficult time are the people who have the most pigment, and they're the ones who are kept from the jobs and kept from the school opportunities and kept from being supported positively by the social system. Then Dr. Shockley wants to say, well, you see, I have proof of what I'm saying, because you see these people over here who are achieving, they look like they seem to have, white genetic material mixed in with the black. And so that we can throw that out, Dr. Shockley, by understanding how white people how the effective majority of white people seem to relate to the whole color of blackness as opposed to something that is approaching the lack of color, which we'll call white.
I'd like to pick up on what Dr. Welsing has said, because she has been speaking in such general terms. I'd like to read from her pamphlet here one section on this, which I think shows the difference in viewpoint. I don't accept that this is really a valid reaction. As a psychiatrist, I think Dr. Welsing says she has an opinion this is true. But she says that that the color confrontation theory views the objection to sexual intercourse between blacks and whites on this basis, that it results from the great fear that the white male has of the black male's capacity to fulfill the greatest longing of the white female. Now, this is Dr. Welsing's interpretation of the greatest longing of the white female. And this is what Dr. Welsing says it is.
Have you asked white female about whether they want to have a black baby?
Yes, I asked a few last night.
Well, they're not going to tell you, Dr. Shockley.
All right, that's what. But now let's see what you say. And what Dr. Welsing says they won't tell, but they really have inside is this: that these white females, what they have, the greatest longing they have is that of conceiving and delivering a product of color. Now, how do you know that's true, Dr. Welsing? What do you have to back that up except your own theory?
No. On the basis of white female statements to black male psychiatrists, on the basis of white female statements.
Is this a random sample of the population as a whole?
Well, not a random sample, but substantial numbers of clinical cases. Now,
these are all pathological cases, aren't they, one way or another?
See, there's a lot of information. You can't read my whole theory over the television. It's unfortunate.
Yeah, just 1 second. Yeah. 1 point. Then are you saying that white women with black men are pathological or sick?
She is talking about a group, as I understand, a sample that she got in connection with her psychiatric practice. I may be misunderstanding, but I think that's the sample she had.
I'm talking about the behavior of aggression, sexual aggression, moving from white to people of color. Now, we are all aware of the sexual aggression on the part of white males towards black women and other women of color. That's why we have all of these multicolor mixed people that you want to talk about, because of the white male's attraction for black women and other people of color. So that's a demonstrated fact. All right. Now, white females also have a desire for color. Now, you've got, makeup on, and white people spend a lot of time during the summer trying to color themselves and trying to tan themselves, which is also evidence of the desire for color for people who lack the ability to produce color. Now, a white woman is not going to say to the average white man, look, I want to have something that you can't possibly give me. Now, she will only say that to a black man. We see all of the evidence of white women with black men. Those are not black men who have gotten white women. Those are white women who have signaled to a black man that they're available, that I want to be with you. And we see a lot of that. I'm certain that where you come from, California, I'm certain that you have seen a lot of it. You certainly see a lot of it in New York. Now, how do you explain it? The way that white people have explained it is that black men want to rape white women. Or that black women, I guess, want to sexually aggress towards white men, but it's only the white group under white supremacy that has had the freedom and the liberty to go out and pick whatever sexual partner they want.
Dr. Shockley, how do you respond to that?
Well, it had a number of sort of psychiatric factors in here. I think one thing that needs to be emphasized on this is one is dealing with a very small percentage of the population.
No, you're dealing with large numbers of people. I mean, all of the mixed people that you talked about a few minutes ago, all of the light brown skinned black people are people who are products of the white male sexual aggression against a woman of color.
May I finish?
Yeah, please.
The point I was going to make is that the women you were talking about, who you say back up your assertion that the greatest longing of the white female is that of conceiving and delivering a product of color.
Right.
That's what you say. And you believe this applies to almost all white females, or just to a tiny fraction? My point was
to a very large number who are willing
50%?
The same number, let me say the same number who will chance getting skin cancer by sun tanning.
May I go to the next question, please?
Okay.
Thank you so much. You're on Black Journal. Go ahead, please.
Yes, I'm a student at City College and a member of the Attica Brigade. And first of all, I'd like to know if it's true that Shockley has established a foundation which is already offering black women money to be sterilized. I'd also like to know how Channel 13 justifies giving a platform to a racist like this when all across the country students have kicked him off the campuses and refused to allow him to speak.
I'd like to answer the last part of the question. I am the executive producer of this program. I invited Dr. Shockley, and I am obviously black. And I feel, as I said at the open of the program, that Dr. Shockley has a right to state his theory. Dr. Shockley, would you like to answer the first part of the question?
I'd like to say that I have established a foundation. It's called FREED, F-R-E-E-D, which stands for the Foundation for Research and Education on Eugenics and Dysgenics. I would like to say that it has not offered bonuses for sterilization to anyone. I have, as the president of that foundation, said that I believe a trial run of this might be one of the most important things that could be done. And let me say, as I did before, that it would apply to anyone, and the bonus would be based upon genetic disabilities, and also there would be an IQ factor in it. And on this, I reason that this might be, in the end, very profitable to society, and it might also be of enormous value to the economics of the black community, if one thinks about it. Because if in the black community, the birth rate is very high at the bottom end, it is well known throughout the world, where there are high birth rates in localized populations, these almost inevitably are associated with poor economic situations. So that if the black community is, as I fear, suffering as a whole from the very high birth rates of their least effective elements, then a means of helping, of stopping this by voluntary bonuses which would give an annuity to the people who are involved. This might be a kindness to the people involved. It might be a kindness to the children.
But I think you've answered the question.
Yes.
And may I go to the next?
Yes,
All right. Go ahead. You're on Black Journal, please.
Of what we know about ancient black civilizations, how can American blacks suddenly be genetically regressive?
Thank you.
Let me just say this. What is very interesting is in the study of biology, biologists who have studied evolution, one of the very interesting things that they say is that the more functional skin pigment cells in the animal kingdom, the higher you are on the scale of phylogenetic ascension. In other words, nature in the course of evolution went to its highest state when it produced a cell that could produce pigment, and that we were sliding backwards. The mutation to albinism is a step backwards in the scale of evolution. Are you aware of that, Dr. Shockley?
No, I'm not aware of that particular one. I am aware of another basic genetic difference, and that is that the rate of maturation of a neurological system gets longer and longer the more advanced the animal is. And that is one of the items on the racial difference, that the neurological development of blacks is faster than whites. Black babies walk on the average a month earlier than white babies. And the period of
black
gestation...
people are much more creative also than white.
Dr. Wells, Shockley, correct me if I'm incorrect. Didn't the Giselle schedule, which tested the intelligence of children, make a correlative between intelligence and walking early?
Yes.
And I would think it probably would have been negative.
No, it was not.
Positive.
It was positive.
Well,
The motor skills on the Giselle schedule indicated that earlier precocious walking children, there was a correlation between that and high intelligence.
This may be true. It might be true within a group. I'm not sure of that.
Well, maybe
I know that there is a correlation in terms of things earlier than walking. In this, at the 6-month stage, Nancy Bailey at Berkeley has established that white children who come from the most advanced families and who later, when they become older, are out at the top, at the first 6 months they are relatively retarded compared to children who are from families of less accomplishment and who don't go as far. But this, so there are a number of these things certainly to be brought in.
Fine.
But this
Giselle schedule is a very authentic, accepted, institutional psychological experiment.
And so is the Nancy Bailey early test.
I'd like to take another
Okay,
call
go
at
ahead.
this. You're on Black Journal. Go ahead, please.
Hello. This question is addressed to Dr. Welsing. First, I would like to say that Mr. Brown and Dr. Welsing disprove immediately Dr. Shockley's concept, because here we have two highly intelligent, gifted people. But getting this out of the way, Dr. Welsing.
Neurological development of blacks in the black community, the birth rate is very high at the bottom end. It is well known throughout the world, where there are high birth rates in localized populations, these almost inevitably are associated with poor economic situations. So that if the black community is, as I fear, suffering as a whole from the very high birth rates of their least effective elements, then a means of helping, of stopping this by voluntary bonuses which would give an annuity to the people who are involved. This might be a kindness to the people involved. It might be a kindness to the
But I think
children.
you've answered the question.
Yes.
And may I go to the next?
Yes, sure.
All right. Go ahead. You're on Black Journal, please.
Of what we know about ancient black civilizations, how can American blacks suddenly be genetically regressive?
Thank you.
Let me just say this. What is very interesting is in the study of biology, biologists who have studied evolution, one of the very interesting things that they say is that the more functional skin pigment cells in the animal kingdom, the higher you are on the scale of phylogenetic ascension. In other words, nature in the course of evolution went to its highest state when it produced a cell that could produce pigment, and that we were sliding backwards. The mutation to albinism is a step backwards in the scale of evolution. Are you aware of that, Dr. Shockley?
No, I'm not aware of that particular one. I am aware of another basic genetic difference, and that is that the rate of maturation of a neurological system gets longer and longer the more advanced the animal is. And that is one of the items on the racial difference, that the neurological development of blacks is faster than whites. Black babies walk on the average a month earlier than white babies. And the period of
black
gestation...
people are much more creative also than white.
Dr. Wells, Shockley, correct me if I'm incorrect. Didn't the Giselle schedule, which tested the intelligence of children, make a correlative between intelligence and walking early?
Yes.
And I would think it probably would have been negative.
No, it was
positive.
not. It was positive.
Well,
The motor skills on the Giselle schedule indicated that earlier precocious walking children, there was a correlation between that and high intelligence.
This may be true. It might be true within a group. I'm not sure of that.
Well, maybe
I know that there is a correlation in terms of things earlier than walking. In this, at the 6-month stage, Nancy Bailey at Berkeley has established that white children who come from the most advanced families and who later, when they become older, are out at the top. At the first 6 months, they are relatively retarded compared to children who are from families of less accomplishment and who don't go as far. But this, so there are a number of these things certainly to be brought in.
Fine.
But this
Giselle schedule is a very authentic, accepted, institutional, psychological experiment.
And so is the Nancy Bailey early test.
I'd like to take another
Okay,
call.
go ahead.
You're on Black Journal. Go ahead, please.
Hello. This question is addressed to Dr. Welsing. First, I would like to say that Mr. Brown and Dr. Welsing disprove immediately Dr. Shockley's concept, because here we have two highly intelligent, gifted people. And but getting this out of the way, Dr. Welsing, wouldn't you agree that there is a strong genetic component to the inheritance of intelligence? Geneticists believe that 80% component is hereditary. Let me finish, Dr. Welsing. And then also, I think the association of skin color with intelligence is an erroneous concept. And I want your views on this. Isn't it true that the historic fate of black people, the tragic deprivation, the conditions under which they were raised, any people raised under these conditions would have an hereditary evolutionary background, which could lead to poor capacity to generalize, to conceptualize, to be creative in the form field of ideas, and develop other excellent attributes. Now, this is not a racist idea. This could happen to any group who has a tragic history of the black people.
Thank you.
No, I do not feel that there's any evidence to suggest that 80% of the ability to come to terms with your environment that has to do with heredity. I think that much of it has to do with the environmental opportunity that the genetic material is exposed to. I think that if we look at the black people, if we just take the black group, and we look at those people who have been able to achieve, and we look at their backgrounds, we will find that they have had substantial social and economic opportunities that maybe some of the segment of the black population has not had. We will find the same thing in the white group. Those white people who have been socioeconomically deprived and at the bottom of the economic scale for whites, that these people are not performing in the same way that people who have extended socioeconomic opportunity. One of the very interesting things is that white women are now talking about women's liberation, and they are looking at their performance relative to white men, and they are saying, and all of the spokesmen for white women, and men and women are also saying, that the reason that the white woman has less confidence in her performance and is not performing as well, relatively speaking, as a white male, has been the attitudes within the white family as to the role of the woman versus the role of the man. Now, what is interesting is that when white people are looking at the difference in the performance of the white woman and the white man on IQ tests, they can account for that on the basis of environmental influences. However, when they shift over into looking at whites relative to people of color, somehow they want to drop that understanding and that awareness.
All right. Thank you. We'll take another call. Go ahead, you're on Black Journal, please.
Yes, good afternoon. Mr. Shockley, I would like to know if the whites are superior to blacks, why is it that whites have to set up barriers to prevent blacks from advancing to ensure their place in being superior? If they're superior, why can't they just open up the whole field and let all of the blacks advance as far as they can without fear of their own position?
Thank you.
Well, the question presupposes a situation which may not necessarily be true. There certainly is, at the present time, enormous efforts to remedy and overcome what must have been, what certainly were, extremely profound injustices in the past, in the days of slavery. But one effect of this, I think, may be to produce effectively paranoid groups of blacks in these black student groups, where attempts have been made to bring underqualified students into college. When they get into college, they tend to band together. They're an isolated, separate, distinguishable group. Some years ago, the Black Studies effort was quite possibly a defensive mechanism on this. So I think some of the sorts of questions like this one can be looked at from a number of different points of view. But what is really needed, from my point of view, is to try to do experiments like the one I was talking about at Howard University of determining the fractions of white and black ancestry.
That's a false experiment, Dr. Shockley. We've already run through that.
I would like to, not speaking to the yay or nay of your statement, but I would like to amplify and help qualify something you said. You said bringing unqualified black students into colleges. White colleges have been bringing unqualified white students into college since we've had colleges because they were white. Number two, you said black students band together in college, white students band together in college, and it would seem to me to be rather abnormal for a black student to go to a white college and want to band with whites when whites didn't want to band with blacks. So I think I'm not dealing with the other side of your problem. I think black students have a right to, and I don't think they're being paranoid any more than a white student is being paranoid for joining a white sorority or a white fraternity. I'd like to get another call. Okay. Go ahead, you're on Black Journal, please.
Yes, I would like to ask Dr. Shockley how he feels about men and women who have higher IQ than his own, who disagree with his opinion.
Thank you.
Well, I'd say one thing is IQ is certainly not everything. I've said that before, and another point I would say, I'm not sure whether necessarily many of the people I've run into have higher IQs or lower IQs, but I've run into highly professional people who are violently opposed to my views, eminent anthropologists, who, when I get into questions such as this determination of racial composition, I think particularly of a conversation with a man who was at that time or within a year a president of the American Anthropological Association, he was not aware of the scientific work that had been done by men like Bentley Glass and a number of others on determining the fractional mix. And when we got deeper into this, some area of his reasoning just ran into blocks. So what I conclude is we're in a situation now which is like I don't compare, let me say right off, I don't want to compare myself with Galileo, but I want to compare the situation which prevails.
Nor Hitler.
Nor Hitler, no. Well, I think we've covered enough ground for the moment. You threw me off on this now. But the point is that there is in this area, I feel, a wishful thinking, effectively a cover-up, and a very threatening cover-up. And I will say that I feel sure I've not made the point this evening, but when I showed this chart with the relative sizes of white and black families, of number of children born per woman, For the blacks and the whites, depending on socioeconomic class, this is far more threatening to the blacks. And when people say you're doing these very evil things, Shockley, you are undermining them and so on, I say if my conclusions, my reasoning are right on this, it is quite likely there's no one who's going to make a bigger contribution to the black future in the next generation than I am.
We have
okay.
2 minutes, and I'd like you to take this question.
Okay.
You're on Black Journal. Go ahead, please.
Okay, I have one question for Dr. Shockley. I'm a physician in New York, and I was wondering, I respect Dr. Shockley as a scientist, and I was wondering if really his retrospective studies really have very much justification in terms of eliminating the obvious environmental factors which are really important, and whether in order to arrive at any scientifically justifiable conclusions, one shouldn't do prospective studies taking black and white infants, and large numbers of these, and studying them under the same environmental conditions, and thus trying to eliminate that absolutely essential factor.
Dr. Shockley, could you make it brief? And then Dr. Welsing,
yes,
then we're going to be closing.
One cannot answer it at all adequately briefly, but I will try to say some very brief things on this. One of the things that would be very striking and interesting would be data on the probably some tens, maybe hundreds, of black slum children in New York City who have been adopted into middle-class Jewish families. If this difference produced approximately a 30 IQ point difference, which is about what you would expect to find on the basis of what would have happened had the children stayed at home versus what happened when they went into these highly intellectual, highly stimulating intellectual families, I believe a study on this would exist and would be very well known. It doesn't exist.
All right, Dr. Welsing, we have about 15 seconds. Please have the last word.
I hope that the people of color in the television audience will again see what I call the neurotic necessity on the part of a representative of the white group to talk destructively about the genetics of people who are genetically dominant to themselves.
Thank you so much. It's been interesting, to say the least. I'm happy you had your say, Dr. Shockley, and Dr. Welsing. I'm happy you had yours, and thank you for being on Black Journal.
Black or white superiority.